Early this week, Nvidia announced that they were delaying RTX 4080 Super reviews a day to allow for reviewers to have more time due to shipping issues. And I am going to level with you. Nobody I talked to, and I did reach out to multiple large reviewer websites and YouTube channels, nobody I spoke with said that they had any issues getting their RTX 4080 Supers on time. In fact, if anything, they all told me to a person that they got the 4080 Super samples early compared to the other reviews. And so, well, of course, I can't be sure there wasn't one or two YouTube channels that didn't get their RTX 4080 Supers on time. I think it's actually this and this and this is why Nvidia pushed back the reviews to launch day. I believe that they knew that these results, that at worst don't even show an improvement over the 4080, and at best still end up losing to the 7900 XTX in rasterization by almost double digits in some averages. And honestly, there wasn't even a convincing enough ray tracing performance increase over the XTX, in my personal opinion, to say it even made up for the rasterization loss. I don't know. These results, I don't think they could have helped Nvidia with day one sales. And you have to remember that I have been leaking all month that every retail source I had been speaking with said that, well, maybe the 4070 Super didn't have great day one sales and there wasn't a ton of interest in the 4070 Ti Super, that 4080 Super pre-orders were actually pretty high. More interest than a lot of the retailers I had spoken to had seen for many months. And so, look, I don't want to get too tinfoil hatty on this one, but nobody I spoke with before the 4080 Super launch had any trouble getting their cards on time. I was told that the 4080 Super had a surprising amount of pre-orders, and I don't know. I'm just going to suggest that I do think Nvidia saw the horrible 4070 Ti Super day one sales and reviews and said, we've got a lot of pre-orders, let's avoid letting that happen to this launch. But are day one sales actually bad then? Did it work? Well, if I put these quotes on screen, kinda actually. The first source that I spoke to, who works at a major online retailer, told me that they received less supply than the 4070 Ti Super did for day one. And so it did sell out, but at least for this source, which remember, each retailer in each country on Earth is just one of the large data points you have to look at to assess overall global day one sales. But at least this major online retailer told me that the 4080 Super did sell out quickly, but that they had very, very bad volume, and so they couldn't really conclude if its sales would have been better than the 4070 Ti Super if it had more volume, because it just didn't have a whole lot. Now, the second source, though, and this person is at a major non-US online retailer, told me that there was a massive amount of initial sales in the first hour, and already this would mean this was a better launch than the 4070 Ti Super for this online retailer outside the US, but that after that, it has kind of petered out a bit. We'll see what happens tomorrow or in a week from now, but long term, this person who works at a major non-US online retailer is not sure this is going to change things overall at the macro level for the 4080 class of cards, but at least short term, it's selling better. It's just weird how it seemed to like all be pre-orders and then the sales stopped. All right, moving on to source number 3. And again, this is just one of the data points, but this one told me that day one sales at this US retailer were terrible. Despite the initial interest, people that said they wanted the card did not show up to pick it up there. Now, source number 4, though, and this is one of the biggest US retailers. This person, on the other hand, said they got a decent amount of supply and that it's selling significantly better than the RTX 4070 Ti Super did. However, it's not selling like graphics cards used to a couple years ago. In other words, it is easily selling better than any recent Nvidia launch by far, and it's definitely outselling the OG 4080's sales, but it's not close to what the 4090, 7900 XTX, or RDNA 2 or Ampere launchers were able to achieve on day one. So, yeah, there you go. The RTX 4080 Super, like this channel predicted, is at least selling okay on day one, but it does seem like a bit of a mixed results. Now, they're mixed results that overall are far more encouraging to what I was told about the 4070 Super, or even the 4070 Ti Super for day one sales, but, you know, it's just, again, it's all relative. This is not selling like the 4090 did. This is not selling like the 7900 XTX has, where it's practically selling like a mid-range card despite costing almost $1,000. But it is selling better than the other recent Nvidia launches, and it's certainly at least improving the situation for the RTX 4080 if AMD doesn't drop the price on the 7900 XTX. Although, again, because the results are mixed, I have to say that I will conclude that I believe that if AMD were to drop the price on the 7900 XTX to $900, and especially if they did something like what they did with the 7900 XT, where the official price becomes $900 or $750 in the case of the 7900 XT, but then you have plenty of AIBs selling it for like another $20 or $30 below that, so like some 7900 XTXs hit $850. I think that would be enough to keep Navi 31 sales going strong. Although, honestly, there's no way around it as long as the RTX 4090 is basically unbuyable below $2,000, or at least easily. I think the 4080 Super is just going to sell better than the 4080 did. That doesn't mean the 7900 XTX, if it gets a price drop to $900 or lower, won't keep selling just as strong as it already is. It just is to say that the people that were unwilling to buy a 4090 for $2,000 or a 4080 for $1,200, those people are still out there. They only want to buy Nvidia, and it's clear that they will buy the 4080 Super at $1,000 if the 4090 is always well above MSRP. And that is a situation that I think people need to get used to happening. You can have AMD sales go up and keep going strong, but then also have the people that will only buy Nvidia not buy Nvidia, no matter what AMD is doing, but also no matter what Nvidia does until Nvidia finally gives them the price they were waiting for. And yeah, we'll just have to wait a couple weeks to see how this develops further. But so far, the 4080 Super, despite getting some pretty bad reviews that I'm not even saying I disagree with, but despite getting pretty bad reviews, it's clearly filling some niche that some people were waiting for, at least as of now. All right, so that's going to do it for the 4080 Super analysis, but I now actually want to get into some far more interesting leaks about upcoming consoles that you probably didn't know are actually in the works right now, and also clarify some things about Zen 5 that I see circulating out there. But first, an ad from Micro Center. Micro Center is a proud sponsor of Moore's Law Zen, and I'm proud to have them as a sponsor. They're one of the best places to go in the United States to buy things like the 4080 Super or 4070 Super, of course, 7600 XT, 7800 XT. Go to Micro Center if you're even remotely close to one. It is worth the trip to get insane deals like 32 gigabytes of DDR5 for free with the best gaming processor on earth, a processor that is selling gangbusters right now, and yet even with that top seller, they'll give you 32 gigabytes of RAM for free. But they'll also give you other deals that stack on top of those insane deals. Like if you go and click on the links in the description, which does help the channel a lot just clicking on them, but if you do, you can get a $25 off coupon just for submitting a picture of your build that stacks on top of the free RAM, on top of the motherboard discounts that come with buying a CPU at the same time. And you can also get things like the Creality Ender 3 S1 3D printer for just $149. And they are also opening up new locations, it seems like every other month. If you go to the new one in Charlotte, you can get a free 128 gigabyte flash drive for free, and you will also be able to get a free flash drive just for walking in to the new one that will open soon in Miami. So make sure you check out those links in the description and check out your local Micro Center today. All right, now it is time to get to a leak that I am really excited to dive into here. For those, though, who don't remember, this channel broke the story on the PlayStation 5 Pro back in 2021. Back then, I basically outlined that it was in the overall concept design phase to launch in 2023 or 2024, and that they had several options they were considering. Since then, though, there have been the occasional rumor popping up here or there from usually, I would say, dubious corners of the web, but at least in my opinion, it wasn't getting serious again, PlayStation 5 rumors, until last year when details started popping up that sounded like one of the options I heard about Sony considering. And other people I don't consider to be full of crap also were starting to speak about the PlayStation 5 Pro with confidence. So yeah, I put out a video because I was like, this seems to be getting finally near the finish line at this point. And today is not about talking about the specs that much, though, and what they mean. I already put out a video that analyzed the rumors that were out there that sounded mostly true to me. I'm about to confirm which parts of those rumors were true. And that video was just about telling you why that design made sense. But today, well, today I want to confirm what parts of that rumor I've specifically been told by people at AMD are true, and also get into, well, apparently they are also now working on a follow-up PlayStation handheld that will be more reminiscent of the Steam Deck than it will be reminiscent, from what I'm hearing, of the original Vita. But first, I do need to start by confirming the information I was actually digging for from my contacts before I learned far more than I expected. The PlayStation 5 Pro. I personally can confirm that it will be using a 4nm APU with a die-shrunk Zen 2 architecture that they're currently using in still 8 cores. I cannot personally confirm what the clock speeds will be on those Zen 2 4nm cores, but I can say that they're that, so if it hits 4.4 gigahertz, I'm not doubting that. I just haven't been told an exact clock speed myself. But I have been told that the full die does go up to 60 compute units, with current plans to disable down to 56 compute units in the final product. Of course, that could change, I guess, but I also was told 56 compute units, like another rumor I've seen out there right now. And I also was told, think of the architecture in the PS5 Pro as basically RDNA 3. Yes, it might pull from some parts of 3.5 or 4 and so on and so forth, but that you should mostly think of it like RDNA 3, and it'll be up to Sony to explain what other tweaks they've made, and I'm not willing to double down on how much of it is beyond RDNA 3 at this time, but I am willing to say that at least right now, it is still planning to use just 16 gigabytes of 18 gigabit per second GDDR6. I would not be surprised if they bump that up to 20 gigabit per second or something, but at least right now, that's the number I was told, and still over a 256-bit bus. Again, the point of this console, like I explained in a previous video, is not to allow for higher resolutions and higher geometry levels. The point of this console is just to have a checkbox a dev can check that is like, this thing has way more compute now, and, like 30% more bandwidth, enough to double frame rates. We're not going to bother going for higher resolutions. We don't want to make you have to use higher res textures and then put more RAM in the console. Same amount of RAM and some more bandwidth. The point is higher frame rates at existing settings, not making devs have to mess with any settings. If they want to, they probably can if they program to the metal, but most devs don't, and so they want to avoid wasting some of the potential, like what they did see with the PS4 Pro to a certain extent. Anyways, though, I cannot personally confirm anything about an NPU. I'm not doubting it or saying anything for it. I'm just saying I personally can't confirm anything about it, and that I can say this, though. The PS5 Pro Silicon, I was told, was taped out around a year ago and then went through validation. So it's actually been fully validated and basically waiting for a green light for a while now while Sony decides if they want to launch it. I'll get to that later, why I think they may have done that. But ultimately, I have to say that because it has been sitting around for a while, longer than usual, I would say. And so the final decision to launch the Pro or not remains with Sony. But people at AMD expect a holiday 2024 launch. Now, what I am told is not coming out is some sort of Xbox Series Elite. I was told this was a thing canceled late in development and it's just gone. I could probably spend a whole video talking about my thoughts on why Xbox would have canceled an Elite version of a console and Sony might not be canceling the Pro version of a console, but again, that'd have to be for another video. We don't have enough time for that. We need to start talking about this PlayStation handheld here. So yeah, I called it the Vita 2 in the title, but of course, no one says Vita 2. I don't think it will be called the Vita 2. That's just what I'm calling it, kind of tongue-in-cheek, just like someone would have said Xbox 720 back in the day. But what I can tell you is that it is being worked on by AMD, that money has exchanged hands, that Sony is not just asking AMD, they are paying for active development right now, although it is still only currently in high-level design, meaning that they have not decided what it will look like or if they're going to fully greenlight it yet, and that means it's at least 2 years out, and I cannot even really 100% tell you it will launch, but the fact that Sony is working on this is really quite a big deal, actually. And I want to get into what I believe the design could be, briefly, I spoke with some developers, and what I was told is that they do believe that it's plausible that some sort of Vita 2 could utilize 18 compute units, was the same amount of compute units in the PS4, so that it would have native backwards compatibility with all digital PS4 titles. And then for PS5 games, because it would probably use a newer version of the architecture, it's not going to be using a die shrunk version of the PS4. It would be using some variant of the PS5 or PS5 Pro in this scenario, but have half as many compute units, but maybe the same amount of RAM, so that, again, native PlayStation 4 backwards compatibility. I mean, maybe also it would just be a 256-bit bus still, but with like DDR5 or LPDDR5 instead of GDDR6. Again, this is speculation here, I want to be clear. But then less compute units, because the technology just is not there to make 36 compute units from the PS5 work in something that doesn't either cost $1,000 or uses way too much energy. That basically everyone I spoke to, and this is my opinion as well, but it is my opinion, like, the only way a handheld PlayStation would work that runs with AMD is if Sony's planning to try to launch a handheld that can play PlayStation 5 and 4 games, so that they don't have to make Vita games separate from the PlayStation. The idea being, hey, if you have a PlayStation 5 or even PS4 and you have a bunch of digital games, buy this handheld, they will all run on it, and they'll run the PS4 games natively, and PS5 games, well, you'll have to look for the games that have a PlayStation handheld patch. But they do think they could do it, and they do think they could even maybe run it at a lower clock speed than the PS5 usually does, because the clocks are variable. But to be clear, this would not work for all games. I do not think every single PS5 game would be supported, just as many as get per game testing and patching, and they would of course run it far lower resolutions at a minimum than the PS5 version of the game. Now, alternatively though, what I would also suggest, and has been suggested to me by people at AMD, is that perhaps what this handheld is, that apparently was commissioned to be worked on right after they started working with AMD on the PlayStation 6, which I am also confirming today. This isn't really a surprise to anyone, but the PlayStation 6, there's a contract between AMD and Sony already on that what they want a handheld PlayStation to be, potentially, is part of the PlayStation 6 family, and be something that launches more so for the Japanese market with weaker performance. They could even take that APU and launch some PlayStation Series S variant that isn't a handheld version if they want to, but then sell the handheld models to the Japanese market that seems to be allergic to home consoles. And in that scenario, it makes a lot of sense. That would be something that's probably 4 or 5 years away. Basically, Sony wouldn't be saying we're trying to make a die-shrunk version of the PS5 that mostly runs PS4 quality graphics. What they would be saying is, hey, developers in 2027 or 28 or 29 or something, I know you're now working on all these PlayStation 6 games. Well, we're also giving you an SDK where this version of the PlayStation 6 still just has 36 compute units or something, and now you can program your game from the get-go to run on this weaker version of it. So, yeah, again, I just want to be very clear about this. What I can 100% confirm today is that there is a new PlayStation handheld in early development at AMD with Sony, and that AMD has already gotten the contract for the PlayStation 6. However, the exact specs and details of the PS6 and the Vita 2 are speculation by me. I'm not saying I'm sure it has 18 compute units or anything like that. I'm just telling you what I think would make sense. But I do want to be clear about something here. I do think this type of a product does make sense, and I do think it does make sense that Sony would be considering a new handheld generation after completely disregarding its viability after the PlayStation Vita was not a major sales success. And that's because the landscape has entirely changed since the PlayStation Vita failed to live up to expectations. Since then, Nintendo has proven with the Switch that if you can make a console that has one library that you can put on a big screen TV or carry with you, that people will pay for it. That they just maybe before didn't want to pay for a worse experience in the Vita than what you could get from a PS4 that also has different games that aren't on the PS4. People, if they buy a PlayStation, expect to be able to play PlayStation games. They don't want to have to go, oh, is it on the Vita, the PSP, the PS4, 5? They just want to know if they buy it, it will work. And the Switch has proven that a hybrid console that does not make it so that you have to choose which Nintendo console you want, it sells to both groups of people, and it will be a success. Now, of course, besides that, though, we got to talk about the Steam Deck. The Steam Deck has been a surprise success for many people, but not just in that it has sold decently well. Also, it has also proven you can make money from a handheld in other methods than I think anybody realized you could before. So, what I think Sony's probably seen with the Steam Deck is they've looked around and they've said, oh my God, people are buying Steam games more often now because they know that those people are hedging their bets that maybe someday they'll buy a Steam Deck. Or if they have a Steam Deck, they want to be able to buy a game once and play it both on their PC and laptop and Steam Deck. I think Sony's looked at that, the increase in Steam sales, and gone, ooh, if we had a portable console, this would increase the amount of sales that are digital, which we wish all sales were digital. And people would just go, well, I can get the game on disc, or I can get the game digitally. And then in the future, if I get a PlayStation handheld, I can play my game on the go. I think that's a huge motivating factor for Sony. And it's also a differentiating factor for PlayStation. We've seen a lot of people online talk about how they would pay extra to buy a game on Steam instead of getting it on Game Pass or waiting for it to be cheaper on some Ubisoft or something store because they want it to be able to run on their Steam Deck as well. And I think this is a factor that Sony's looking at and going, this will make people have another reason to buy a PlayStation. And if they have a PlayStation, to buy the digital version of the game. And again, it also gives Sony a new option to sell into the Japanese market that seems hell-bent on only buying portable consoles. So from that perspective, this also makes a lot of sense. And yeah, that's basically most of what I have to say about these PlayStation leaks today. The only other thing I would say about the PlayStation 5 Pro is, why would Sony have tabled it for a while and then decided to go with it now? Well, we have seen in 2 AMD earnings reports in a row that though Radeon sales are up, semi-custom sales are down. Now, one could, of course, assume that this has to do with the Xbox sales falling apart, and I'm sure it does to a certain extent, but there's no way for us to not also maybe suggest PlayStation sales, though not bad, are starting to go down, and then Sony's looking at that. They're also looking at the launch of GTA 6 coming and going, yeah, if we could launch a console that we could claim is the best place to play GTA 6 for a year or two before it comes to PC, that is a massive marketing boom for us. So, yep, sales are going down a bit. Let's also launch the PlayStation 5 Pro to capitalize on GTA 6 sales and also spice things up during a declining year. All right, now, one final thing I want to touch on today briefly is just some clarifications and updates following that Zen 5 leak this channel put out at the beginning of the week. For those who missed it, this channel exclusively leaked details about AMD's 800 series motherboards for Zen 5, and also that Zen 5 was unfortunately launching in the second half of this year, not the first half, as many people had been incorrectly speculating for a while now. And also, that's been confirmed now by AMD reps as per the managing editor at Tom's Hardware. So now it's set in stone. There's really no debate about it. And now that we know that Zen 5 is coming out later than what a lot of people were expecting, is it doomed? I imagine there's a lot of people going, what's wrong with Zen 5? And what I want to say is, first of all, this is very important. Nobody I speak to at AMD is worried about Zen 5 being competitive with Intel in the second half of this year. They are sure that whatever they have to do, they can do, that it will be price to performance competitive with Intel, and that they don't believe they're going to be swamped by whatever Intel ends up launching at the end of this year. But I will say this. Generally speaking, Zen 5 is not quite as good as they were hoping it to be. And actually, this kind of was already confirmed by this channel when I put out a slide directly showing that the IPC uplift at least is not guaranteed to be as high as the highest IPC uplifts we've seen from some CPU launches over the past 5 years. It's still going to be respectable. It's still going to be good, though. It's just, no, it's not going to be a 30% IPC uplift. And I'm telling you it will not be, people. It will not be, okay? But it's still going to be a decent architectural uplift. And the fact is, though, this just ran into a lot of issues. Both issues that popped up once they started testing the silicon, and also issues that had to do with, well, some regressions in performance going from 3 nanometer to 4 nanometer. I'm told that initially Zen 5 was all 3 nanometer, by the way. Years ago, of course, it was. But that they had some clock speed and performance regressions, not just from bugs that popped up, but from porting from 3 to 4 nanometer for the main version of the architecture. In fact, I'm told they ran into so many issues that they considered porting Strix to Zen 4 for the CPU. This was a year ago or more. Obviously Zen 5 Strix was always planning to use Zen 5, but there was a brief amount of time, I'm told, last year where they were like, shoot, do we have to switch this to Zen 4? They're not going to. That means Zen 5 will turn out at least okay. But that gives you an idea of how many issues it's had. In fact, I'm also told that Zen 6, by the way, is going to have a completely redesigned memory controller basically now, just to make up for some of the problems they ran into. So Zen 6 is also looking like a bigger architectural update than initially intended because of the problems discovered with Zen 5. But yeah, again, Zen 5 is not going to be bad. I still expect a 10 to 20% IPC uplift, but that's 10 to 20%, not 20 to 30%. The upper estimates that are out there right now, they're wrong. I'm told directly they are wrong, but that's still a decent IPC uplift. And yeah, I'm also told that the clock speed uplift, if there even is one, is not going to be what they were initially hoping for. But do not expect this thing to be clocked like, 10% lower than Zen 4 or something. And look, here is where I get to the good news. It won't have as much of an IPC uplift as they were hoping. It won't be as efficient as they were hoping. The clock speed will not be increased as much or at all as like they were hoping. But think about this. If Zen 5 was some, let's say, 25% performance uplift, ready to launch in Q1 of this year, do you not think AMD would have charged for it? An X3D, I was always told, would not be ready until the second half of this year. Anyways, so if Zen 5 was a complete home run, I think it would have cost more and not had X3D at launch. And I am pretty confident now, I guess I can't say I'm sure, but it is sounding like AMD is considering, when they announce Zen 5 later this year, they will announce the X3D models as well, and they're even considering using one of the Zen 5C chiplets with it for a core count increase. I'm not confirming that. I'm saying I think it's likely they launch with X3D or close to when the X3D models launch, and they don't try to hide it from you and milk you and get you to double spend, and that they might even also increase core counts at the top of the lineup. So at the end of the day, think about it. This is not going to be the peak level that we were hoping it might be, or that some people were. I kind of have been warning you for a while it wouldn't be, but that at the end of the day, because Zen 5 is not going to be the absolute top of what they can achieve, they're going to have to pull out other stops and probably charge more reasonable prices. And instead of being milked and waiting and jerked around for a year, I think now AMD is just going to have to not be cocky when they launch Zen 5. That could end up being beneficial to people that care about price performance more than ultimate performance. And actually, that's all I have left to say in this exhaustive video that went through the 4080 Super to PlayStation consoles to Zen 5 itself. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure that you like it and subscribe to the Moore's Law Z YouTube channel. And then also, just a reminder, all of this stuff that people will trash and then not admit they were wrong for trashing this channel, this took a lot of work, like hours of phone calls and staying up past midnight multiple days to get you all the correct information. For example, that Zen 5 is not something that's right around the corner, so that you can make correct purchasing decisions based on what your needs are. That takes much more work than just screaming at someone on Twitter like I'm seeing a lot of people do right now. And just remember, if you want to reward that work, the best place to do it is the Patreon. Just $2 a month gets you access to hundreds of bonus die shrink videos that never have any ads in them. A new one just came out, actually, looking at benchmarking in 2024, the good and the bad things about it, and where we think this industry might actually need to change, me and Dan. And as well, you can talk about this video with me on the Discord. You'll get access to that if you join the Patreon as well. You can ask us questions. Another guest is coming on following this weekend to talk about all these PlayStation leaks as well and what's going on in the console space. You can ask this guest questions if you join the Moore's Law Z Patreon. But then, for everybody else, no matter what, thank you for watching.